All right, you guys, good afternoon. It is still Wednesday, May 13th, 2026, first day of early voting in the Iowa primary elections. And we have another Facebook Live interview. Again, these were intended to be debates. Not every candidate responds. And in this situation, in House District 63, Republican Matthew Smith is challenging Representative Michael Bergen. In House District 63, Representative Bergen did not reply to multiple inquiries on our end, did not want to participate. So we are just going to have Matthew on to discuss the race in House District 63. And where is House District 63? House District 63 is right here. Very rural district. I don't think I'm offending anybody when I say very rural. If I am, I guess 90% of Iowans are offended. Um, because I was mostly rural. But House District 63 includes Decorah, Cresco, Lime Springs, Elma, Jackson Junction, uh, Clearmont. Did I say that right?
I think it's Claremont.
Okay. And then Kalmar, Spillville, Fort Atkinson, any other little towns or cities, Matthew, that you want to pander to and make sure they get a shout out.
Yeah, I know. I was just doing some door knocking in Fort Atkinson a few days ago, so shout out to them. And then, especially the small folks up in Chester and Burr Oak, I'm hoping to get up there at some point later this week and do some more door knocking.
Okay. All right, so that is the district. Now, here's the deal. Even if you do not live in House District 63 and you want to make an impact, you can. There's 125 legislative races this year. Only 22 or so of them have Republican primaries in them. So the odds are very good that you have no horse in a race in June when it comes to a legislative primary. Now, in House District 63, you could help out with donations. You could help out by making phone calls from your own house into the district. You could help out with letters to the editor. You can help out if you live near the district, but you're not quite in there and you can't vote. You can still go help door knock. Representative Bergen, I'm going to take some liberty here, Matthew. You don't have to pile on if you don't want to. But Representative Bergen has one of the most liberal voting records of any House Republican. Um, and it's on a plethora of issues. So this is a race that you should care about, you should be paying attention to, and you should certainly want to get involved in. Matthew, as it relates to you, why did you decide to run for the Iowa House?
So the reason why I ultimately decided to run ties back into what you were talking about, is the fact that Representative Bergen has one of the most liberal records in the Republican Party. So he's voted in favor of the CO2 pipeline 3 times. He's voted against funding for school choice. He was absent for the vote on the heartbeat bill in Iowa. And he was the only Republican that voted to allow biological men in women's sports. And as soon as I heard his record, I'm like, this is absolutely terrible, and I need to run and change something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a big deal, especially as we face the prospect of a Democrat governor next year. If you have moderate Republicans in the Iowa legislature and you have enough of them, you don't need many, you just need enough, then they're going to be more apt to work with a Democrat governor. And that could spell trouble because, again, as Matthew referenced, Representative Bergen's voting record is very poor at best. I'll go through that later, probably at the end. But for now, Matthew, Republicans have had full control of the state for 10 years. Tell me one thing that you think they should have gotten done that they haven't yet.
Number one thing, and I've posted about this on my campaign page too, is the eminent domain issue. This country was founded on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and private property is essential to that. And if you start allowing private entities to come in and take land for their bottom line, that doesn't sit right with me. And that should not sit right with anyone. So I'm incredibly disappointed that with 10 years of Republican control, with 5 years of a Republican trifecta, that we couldn't get this done.
Yeah. Um, Now, is there one thing that they have gotten done that you think maybe wasn't the best thing for them to do, or maybe hasn't worked out as well as what you would have hoped?
So one thing that we'll wait and see what happens. I really don't like the prospect of them passing property tax reform on, what was it, like a 48-hour workday where they slept in the Capitol and passed it incredibly last minute. And that just doesn't sit right with me. That's kind of a red flag, like, hey, this may not be the best possible law because you kicked the can down the road for the entire session and had to get it done last minute.
Yeah, that makes sense. 34-hour marathon session. I guess walk us through what you think is kind of the difference between like a Republican and a conservative, and where do you kind of put yourself on that spectrum?
Yeah. So a Republican is, honestly, I would say a lot like what Bergen is right now. It's someone who's like, well, I appreciate fiscal conservative side of things, but social side I'm not nearly as adept at, or not adept, but focused on. And I think that's what has led to a lot of erosion, especially in my generation, of patriotism and stuff like this. So conservatives are people who are actually willing to go in and tackle social issues head on while still focusing on saving money where possible. And I think I'm falling into that platform of running as a true conservative because I'm someone who wants to preserve this incredible state. I'm a first generation Iowan. My parents are from Texas and Louisiana, respectively. And I love this state. I love it here.
Yeah.
And up in the Driftless Corner is that I want to preserve the culture of this state. And I know a lot of Representative Bergen's voting record has not aligned with what this state is.
Yeah. So when you look at, let's just start with kind of um a pretty simple question. Should Iowa legislators be required to live in the district they represent for more than just the 60 days before the general election, which is what they're required to do now?
I would say yes. However, I know I've seen issues, especially in the more rural districts, is that it's incredibly hard to find people to run for some offices. I know Al McKee, it's not in my district, but it's in the county over, had two county supervisor seats that were open. And it resulted in like write-in tickets. So I believe on one side of it, I believe firmly in the grassroots efforts. And I believe firmly that you should live in the district that you're representing.
Yeah,
I
that
realize
seems
I
that's
kind of didn't run the question there. So to put it bluntly, yes, you should live in your district for more than 60 days.
seems like a pretty minor standard to try to meet.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me a little bit about election integrity in Iowa. We obviously have very good elections. We already have voter ID in place. Is there anything in particular that you would favor to strengthen election integrity as it is? Like early voting starts today.
Yep.
I kind of think personally, like if you want to vote early, that's fine. But I would like you to show up in person and do it at the auditor's office as opposed to relying on the mail and basically mailing it in, for lack of a better term. What do you think of that?
Yeah. So the mailing service is the mailing service. It's bound to lose something. And if we start losing ballots, that's a massive issue. Or what will have happen is, on election night at like 4 in the morning, there'll be like a ballot drop off of 500 write in ballots, and that shifts elections. So, what I would support is something like that, is that where if you have the in person option, I realize that for some people it may not necessarily be possible, military and that side of things. But for people who are in state, that, I mean, we have essentially, I'd say, what, 3 weeks total for early voting. Is that I would love for it to be in person so that way you know where the votes are going, you know where they're coming from, and you can verify that whoever is voting is actually the correct person.
Right. Yep. Um, you look at spending in the state of Iowa right now, we spend more than $1 billion than we bring in already. Able to do that because of reserve funds that obviously are only there as long as they're there. And as long as we keep spending more than $1 billion than we bring in, they're not going to be there that long. So what should the state be prepared to do? Should they be prepared to raise taxes, increase revenue, or should they start taking a hard look at what they are spending the $9+ billion on in the state budget?
I think they should take a hard look at what they're spending money on. I know with this past legislative session, there was a bill that came through. I'm drawing a blank on the title of it, but it would have eliminated funding for private and community colleges that had DEI offices that received Iowa tuition grant money. It would have eliminated that. So I think it's taking a hard look at some of the social programs that we're supporting that don't necessarily support the Iowan values.
And just to be
And
clear, that is an issue that you differ with Representative Bergen.
yeah, I believe firmly that DEI has no place in Iowa. It shouldn't have any place in this country. The fact that you're allowing it's essentially reverse racism is how I'll like to describe it. Is where you try so hard to be anti-racist that you end up isolating the white population in the country. And that rather than having the people best qualified for the position, you're instead lowering standards to allow more people in.
Yep. Now you've already talked about the eminent domain issue.
Yep.
Again, another point of distinction between you and Representative Bergen, who has had opportunities to vote in favor of private property rights, and he hasn't. He's
Yep.
sided against landowners multiple times. So I
It was
don't need to ask you anything about that issue unless there's something you want to expand on.
well, I guess the only things I'll say is that, a lot of the stuff I claim I bring receipts on. So it's House File 639 and 943, both of which were the eminent domain issues in the past few cycles. And then it was most recently with 2104 was back in January as well. So these are three incredibly recent examples of Bergen just slapping landowners in the face.
Yeah. Now another big area of disagreement is going to be on education issues. Representative Bergen voted against allowing chaplains in schools, voted against Senate File 496, which was the Parental Bill of Rights in Education. It didn't allow schools to keep secrets from parents in terms of pronouns and gender identity. It took out sexually explicit content and materials from school libraries. Let's see, he's also voted against a bill that would have prohibited instruction related to gender identity for kindergarten through sixth grade. I mean, that these are some pretty significant bills that he's voted against that are, I mean, mainstream Republican, and I would argue, I think most people would argue, an 80% issue.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me a little bit about where you stand on those issues.
So I'm firmly in the right corner of parental rights. I mean, parents should determine where their child goes to school, what fits best for them. And I've had a lot of really good conversations about this with folks in the district. So just recently I had a conversation with a mother of, I believe, two that homeschooled her kids. And she mentioned that Wisconsin, for kids that are homeschooled, they help cover music lessons, they help provide materials, and that's just in Wisconsin. And they have a Democrat governor.
Okay.
So if a state like Wisconsin is able to get that done effectively, well, then why the heck isn't Iowa able to do something like this?
Yep. Now, Representative Bergen also voted against education savings accounts.
Yep.
Our ESAs, the idea that the money should follow the student and the family should be able to decide where they send their child, and whatever money the state is going to kick in toward that kid's education, and not even all of it, some of it, most of it, should
Yep.
follow the student to the school that their family chooses best for them. Are you a supporter of education savings accounts and educational freedom for families?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So we have quite a few of the smaller Catholic schools in the district. That I know I've spoken with a principal at one of them who have said that they can point to 5 families that are able to send their kid to a private school and receive a better education than public because of the ESAs. And those were 5 that they were able to point off the top of their head without even looking at numbers.
Yep.
So I'll let you take it.
Yeah, no, you're good. So you already mentioned DEI, critical race theory. The legislature has taken steps to address those things in the education system. You're supportive of going further because I know that things have passed the Iowa House, but not passed the Iowa Senate. So they're still going to need votes in the Iowa House. And obviously that's a area of distinction between you and your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I would love to focus on and just root out all the garbage. I mean, I went through a private 4 year liberal arts education. And so I've seen firsthand the dangers that a lot of this almost indoctrination does to students.
Yeah.
And people that, even now try and have a conversation about someone with politics, and they may be the nicest person in the world, but as soon as that happens, a switch flips and they are a completely different person.
Yeah.
So it's just fighting that indoctrination head on is something I would love to take a look at.
Now, public libraries across the state have a lot of materials in them that include sexually explicit content and passages. Is that material appropriate for a government institution, a public library, to provide to children? Or would you support efforts to not allow government institutions to give sexually explicit content to children? Which I can't really believe I have to ask, but it's 2026 and they say it's all in the name of progress.
Yeah. So absolutely not. Kids should not have access to sexually explicit material, plain and simple. And I also think, that's kind of it's a not necessarily a double-ended question, but on one hand, they shouldn't be allowed to access it in the first place. But on the other hand, it requires parents actually stepping up and being like, hey, is this stuff that my kid is viewing actually good?
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what's happened a lot across the state is that, with the Parental Bill of Rights, what happened is that schools were allowed to hide material from the parents.
Yep.
And what that creates is a system where kids don't trust parents, parents don't know what's going on with their kids. And so, yeah, plain and simple, they shouldn't have access to sexually explicit material.
Yeah. So the life issue. When do you believe life begins? Iowa obviously has the fetal heartbeat law. Do you think that um, Iowa should go further in protecting the unborn, or are you pretty content with the heartbeat bill?
So, yes and no. I would like Iowa to get farther at some point. What I would like to see as well is finding a way to increase maternal care and making sure, like, hey, and taking a look at the foster care system as well.
Mhm.
So we can do this sort of in tandem. Is that the the stronger the foster care system gets, because a lot of folks, I can't remember the exact percentage, but there is a significant number of kids that go into the foster system that end up becoming criminals and having a record.
Yeah.
And so I would love to see something done on that front to be like, hey, okay, so
And this is
we
another area of distinction. I mean, Representative Bergen voted against the heartbeat bill in 2018 in committee. Um, joined the Democrats to vote against that bill.
on a heartbeat bill.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I believe firmly that life begins at conception. I don't quite know if the state is ready to go all in on that yet.
Right.
I would love to work and make sure that it is ready to go all in on that.
Yeah.
But
You're a young guy, and as long as I'm not seeing dead people right now, you lived through COVID. Uh, do you think that the state legislature has done enough to kind of ensure that should we go through another COVID, the governor cannot have all these powers at their disposal to shut down businesses, shut down churches, require vaccinations, and they did address some of this very late in the session. Some of it remains to be done. Um, do you think that we really do need to kind of comb through that section of Iowa code to ensure that Iowans can maintain their freedoms even in a time of disaster?
absolutely. I know that was when I got sort of really involved in politics was during the pandemic because I saw firsthand what happens when you allow the government to control your lives. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, the government serves the people, not the people serve the government. And we saw firsthand is how quickly we can lose our rights if we allow a single person to be in control of them. And so I'm really thankful for the steps that the legislature has taken to reduce the emergency powers of the governor. I would love to see more taken.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, let's see. Let's go to issues in rural Iowa. Obviously, your district is definitely one of those. I don't know if you guys have had as many issues with wind turbines and data centers as some other areas of the state, but that is an issue that, people feel really strongly and passionately about. What do you think in terms of wind turbines and data centers?
So data centers have absolutely no place in Iowa. But under the current system, they come in, they ruin pretty much everything. They ruin the groundwater supply. They completely drain the energy grid, and it makes everything more expensive for everyone. And especially with the nitrate issue in the state with the water, the adding data centers on top of that is just making a bad situation worse. And then on the topic of wind turbines, I mean, drill baby drill.
Yeah.
We allow American Energy to go into producing this. I know Decorah has a wind turbine, and then they've implemented acres and acres of solar farms to power Luther, and they still need more. They still have a coal plant. So at some point, you have to realize, like, look, this isn't effective in the slightest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, um, let's see if there's anything in this section that I really want to ask you about. Not really. Oh, here's an area of distinction as well. Immigration, crime, and public safety. Representative Bergen voted against establishing a crime of human smuggling as it relates to illegal immigration, voted against the ban on sanctuary cities and counties, and voted against Stand Your Ground in its original form. Now, Iowa obviously has, just like every other state, issues with illegal immigration. Is this something that you think Republicans in the legislature should take more seriously and really try to address from the standpoint of protecting Iowans and really just overall public safety at large? Because illegal immigrants can just as much be a victim at the hand of other illegal immigrants. Um, so we would be better off to try and enforce those laws.
Yeah, I know Iowa has one of the highest rates of human trafficking in the country. And a lot of it can be attributed to if you don't know that people are in the country, well, then how the heck are you supposed to know if they're being trafficked? So, I mean, I stand firmly with ICE and a lot of the work that they've been doing to enforce our federal immigration laws, because believe it or not, we have laws in this country. And if you don't respect them coming in, well, it's going to stop you from respecting them when you're actually in here.
Right.
And especially with police, I mean, my brother has a police background, my cousin has a police background, and I stand firmly with police. I realize that they're there to for public safety, and I'm incredibly thankful to have a really good county sheriff with Dan Marks up in this area.
Yeah.
Another good conservative guy that I know very well. I go to church with him.
Yep.
Um, and so pro ICE, pro police, you know, pro enforcing our immigration laws.
We've seen legislators recently, not as much this year as last year, but recently we've seen legislators, especially in the Senate, be willing to stand up to leadership, withhold their votes on the budget until something happened related to eminent domain and the carbon capture pipelines. What can you think of a time that you've had to stand up to leadership or you had to go against the grain? Or can you tell us about an issue that maybe you would feel strongly enough about that would make you say, "Hey, like I'm with you guys, I'm behind you guys, but on this one, um, I've got to do what I think is best, or I have to represent my district. Can you think of an issue like that?
Um, Here, while I think about that, I'll give you time I've gone against the grain. Just to give me time to think of an answer for that one. Um, so going against the grain, it would have been my freshman year at Luther. I was in a constitutional law class, and the professor asked, like, "Hey, okay, a blind vote. Everyone, put your hands down and raise your hand if you think Roe v. Wade was constitutional." Everyone put their hands up, and she was like, "Okay, put your hands down and raise your hand if you don't think Roe versus Wade was constitutional." Everyone raised their hands, put them down, and everyone put their heads up. Everyone put their heads up, and the professor said, "Well, Matthew, you're the only one that said that it wasn't constitutional." And I went off and just said, "Yeah, it's an overreach of the 14th Amendment, and the right to privacy doesn't necessarily exist, and all this, tangential stuff." But I'm a Republican from Decorah that graduated from Luther, so my entire experience on that front has been, supporting what I believe in and going against the grain on that front.
Yep.
And then, so the legislative issue that I may take a step back on, and kind of break with the grain, is that this was a massive issue in the district about a year and a half ago. Was the issue of detainers from ICE.
Yep.
So our sheriff got a lot of flack for that, and at the end of the day, it was a constitutional issue. Is that saying, hey, if ICE is going to issue detainers for immigration, you better do your darndest to make sure that they're not American citizens that you're detaining.
Right.
And so following due process on that front, I mean, it got a lot of flack from Republicans all across the state. But I realized that at the end of the day, the Constitution exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And so that's one issue I'd be like, hey, you know what? Let's make sure that everything is done as constitutionally as humanly possible.
What are some committees you would be interested in serving on in the
To do something with education. A lot of my, or both of my parents are educators. My sister-in-law is an educator, and my fiance is hopefully going to be an educator here coming up. So I have a strong background in education. I've seen a lot of the issues that the state has had firsthand. When parents will come home and talk about issues they've seen in the workplace, about not necessarily supporting teachers as much as possible, and issues on that front. Also, a fun little thing is that I saw the Iowa Senate established, or there's an established trade commission between Iowa and Ireland. And I would love to do something like that. I've enjoyed traveling a lot throughout, the earlier years. I say earlier years when I'm 22, but I enjoy traveling. I love working with foreign policy. That's a lot of my bread and butter. And so trying to figure out how to make Iowa work better with foreign countries that are buying our corn, buying our soybeans, buying our cattle, buying our pork. And so I would love to do something on that front, just be able to help farmers out as well.
So the first bill you'd sponsor or co-sponsor would address what?
Eminent domain.
Okay.
I've done research, and Minnesota has stricter eminent domain laws than we do, and we all know how Minnesota is run. And I know Texas has a landowner bill of rights that they've established and passed as law that says, hey, it doesn't matter how lucrative this deal is, you cannot use eminent domain for this. It has to be for a public use, power lines, stuff that people need to survive. You don't need a CO2 pipeline to survive. And the fact that they're trying to pass this off is just deeply unsettling.
So we've talked about how people can get involved, people can help your campaign. Even if they don't live in the district, you need their help because you're up against an incumbent. And you're up against an incumbent who has a horribly liberal voting record for a Republican in the Iowa House. So how can they help you? Where can they go to learn more?
Yep. So my website is MatthewSmithForIowaHouse.com. And then my Facebook is Matthew Smith for Iowa House as well. Then my campaign email, I'm honestly drawing a blank on it right now. Sorry if I just clicked off.
It's okay. You take your time, figure it out. I know we just did post the um links to your campaign website as well as your Facebook page. So if people are interested in following your campaign or following your page, they can definitely do that at those links that we included. And I don't know if Matthew realizes this or not, but I did mute him when he um there he's back. All right. So you're going to have to unmute yourself just because I didn't want you to think that you were off camera and muted, so you're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. My campaign email is Matthew for House or Matthew for Iowa. My goodness, I'm sorry.
You're good.
uh yeah, it's just hard to keep all the addresses straight sometimes because I did them all differently, and then my campaign committee has a different name. And so I've realized in hindsight that that's something, if I ever, depending on what happens in the future, that's one thing I'm going to work on is, having everything be under one name. So that way it's easy to remember.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so if anyone wants to meet me or wants to do a Zoom call, something like this, I'd be happy to meet you. I have yet to turn down meeting someone because I realize that it's incredibly difficult to represent someone if you've never met them before in your life. And so that's something I believe firmly in is meeting folks wherever possible. And just that should, that'll make me a better leader.
What are the top 3 issues you're hearing about at the doors in House District 63?
Yep. So one of the big ones is, farmland. Especially up in this corner of the state, it's running from anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 an acre. And there are young people that want to get into farming, but they can't afford to. And so that's something else I would love to address is out-of-state entities purchasing farmland when we have plenty of farmers here that have lived in this area for generations that want to farm but can't afford to. So that's one of the big issues. And then as well is a lot of the social issues. So I'll tell folks about Bergen's record, and they're like, "Oh man, I didn't realize like how bad his record was."
Right.
So a lot of the social issues, a lot of the DEI policies people draw issues with, a lot of the, the men and women's sports they've drawn issues with, and then as well as just the eminent domain issue because there's a lot of farmers in this area. It's a fairly rural district, and I can drive probably 5 minutes out of town and I have already been past 10 farms.
I mean, if you're a Republican primary voter, there is something in Representative Bergen's record that's going to shock you. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I mean, plain and simple, that's a majority of what my campaign has been up to this point is just getting out like, hey, this is his voting record. So for all I know, the campaign could fall flat on its face. I couldn't get more than 100 votes. But at the end of the day, I'm just helping make people aware of how bad our representation has been.
Yeah.
And running as a true conservative alternative to our current representation.
Yep. All right. Anything else you can think to add, Matthew, before we let you go?
Yeah, I guess anyone local, I have yard signs up and ready to go. So if anyone wants a yard sign or anything, feel free to reach out and I will reply as quickly as possible. I'll drive out and I'll meet you. I've put so many miles on my car during this process, and what's a few more, right?
Yeah. All right, Matthew, thanks for your time, guys. Thanks for watching. Get involved, help them out. Thanks a lot.